I, Sanskriti, on behalf of English Department, DAV PG College, and on my personal behalf, heartily welcome our esteemed delegate, Dr. Supriya Singh Ma'am, Department of English, VKM, BHU. I extend a very warm welcome to every faculty and student of English Department, DAV PG College. Professor Supriya Ma'am, Professor Sangeeta Ma'am, Professor Indrajit Mishra sir. As we commence our proceeding with prayers, so I kindly request respected delegates to participate. Please keep silence. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. In Indian tradition, Atithi Devo Bhava. So for welcome, may I request Dr. Mahima ma'am to welcome Dr. Supriya ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I request Dr. Vandana ma'am to welcome Professor Sangeeta Zain ma'am. I request Dr. Najmul sir to welcome Professor Indrajit Mishra sir. Moving ahead, English Department, DAV PG College is a hub of creating and intellect is committed to nurture the eloquence and literary sensibility among students. The college administration has made a provision to conduct lectures from the eminent scholars from all over the India with the view to give exposure to the students to make them successful in their career. Our today's special lecture is on Eyre. Is a classic novel, and the novel has had profound influence on literature and popular culture, inspiring numerous adaptations in various forms, including film, television, and stage production. Ma'am, we are very eager to listen your lecture, so I humbly request ma'am, before deliberation, I would like to give her brief bio. Although she is known figure to everyone, bio is not needed, but still, ma'am holds a PhD in English from BHU and specializes in literary theory, films, and fiction. There are 2 books to her credit, out of which one is collection of short stories, Cheers to Life, published by an internationally recognized publishing house, and other one is edited book entitled Inculcation of Sustainable Development Through Higher Education, an overview. She has got the privilege to speak her ideas in various seminars, conferences, and workshops as a resource person. Ma'am has published numerous research papers in national and international journals. Recently, she awarded the Malviya Smriti Samman 2024 by Professor Hariyarnath Tripathi. And let me add one more thing that is coming in my mind right now. Recently, I saw Dr. Mahima Singh ma'am has put the same award in her status. She has also awarded with this Samman, Hariyarnath. My list is so long. Kindly request Dr. Supriya ma'am for her deliberation. Over to you, ma'am.
First of all, I would like to thank the Department of English, DAV PG College, for giving me this opportunity to impart the deliberation on this novel that though belong to a popular culture, but there is so much to say in it, and that is, I can say that it is a very symbolic novel. I would like to thank Mahima particularly for inviting me for this lecture. Now, I'm also overwhelmed with the honor that has been given to me, so I don't know how much I'm going to impart, but I would try my best. So here I would like to start the lecture. The title of the lecture is Jane Eyre in the Window Seat, an Excursion to Life. So first let me introduce this title, because here Jane Eyre, when you will see or look at the novel, you will find that in the very beginning, the initial scene comes when she is at a window seat. And that window seat has so much to say, because it is not just a seat, it is not just, a part of novel, rather it has so much to say symbolically throughout the novel, because from here she starts her journey of childhood towards maturity. And you will find that this window seat is not just one window seat, rather many a times in the novel the scene repeats, and the repetition every time inculcates some more to her personality. So this way, let me first tell you that I have divided the lecture into 3 parts. The first part would go with the introduction of the novelist, that is Charlotte Bronte. The second part would deal with the summary, and not just summary, but I'll also give some extracts from the novel, so as to make you fix in your mind how Jane Eyre developed, how she was rebellious in the very beginning, how she was bold, how she was courageous. So in order to get to it, you must know exactly what she has delivered, how she spoke, how she reacted in the novel. So I'll also give certain extracts from the novel. And in the third part, I would go on to analyze it as a feminist novel, a gothic novel, a Bildungsroman, a symbolic novel, and an autobiographical too. So let me start with the first part, that is, here I'm going to introduce Charlotte Bronte. So let me tell you that Charlotte Bronte, basically she was born of Patrick Bronte and Maria Branwell, and they had 6 children, and 5 were daughters and 1 son. But all of them were quite, you can say, weak. They were not robust, they were not healthy, and therefore you will find that it was very soon that the family comes to an end, the whole family, and the only one who lived for the longest time, that was at 84 years, the death of the father. Otherwise you will find that Charlotte dies just at the age of 39, and you will find that the other members of the family too died so soon. Now, as I told you that there were 6 children in the family, 5 daughters and a son, you will find that in their girlhood, the 2 elder daughters, that is Maria and Elizabeth, they died in their girlhood when they were at school, and the remaining 3 daughters grew up to be authors. So perhaps if they would have been, alive, we would meet perhaps 2 more authors. But it was unfortunate that these 2 elder daughters, they died in their girlhood. Charlotte Bronte was actually born on 21st April, and it is a coincidence that we are here on 16th of April, and on 21st April it's her birthday. So she took birth on 21st of April 1816, and then 2 years after this, Emily Bronte, that is in 1818, and Anne Bronte in 1820. And it is after giving birth to Anne Bronte in 1820, it is in 1821 that their mother died. And now the responsibility of the family came to the shoulder of Charlotte Bronte particularly, because the 2 elder sisters, they too, as I told you earlier, that they were suffering from tuberculosis, and when they were in school, they died. So this way, Charlotte Bronte took the responsibility of family. It was she who wrote Jane Eyre. It was she who inculcated the habit of writing in 2 of her sisters. And we find that initially, since it was a patriarchal society, they started writing with pseudonyms. Now what is pseudonym is that when they are writing with some other name. So you will find that Charlotte Bronte, she was writing with the name of Currer Bell. And why she was doing so? Because it was, the structure of the society was patriarchal. And when people come to know, as exactly what they have said, these sisters have said, we had a vague impression that authoresses are liable to be looked on with prejudice. And this is the reason perhaps why they wrote with, pseudonym. And Charlotte Bronte, starting with C, she was writing under the pseudonym of Currer Bell. And then Emily Bronte was writing under the pseudonym of Ellis Bell, and Anne Bronte was writing under the name of Acton Bell. So you will find that there is a coincidence, it is not a coincidence, rather intentionally they chose a name which was starting with their original names initials, like Charlotte as Currer, Emily as Ellis, and Anne Bronte as Acton Bell. So this way they were writing under the pseudonyms, and it is after long that people were unable to identify who these writers were, because these names particularly were, if not masculine, they were at least of a neuter gender. So they chose to write with this name. Now, regarding Charlotte Bronte, she was a girl, a plain looking girl, a simple girl, not that attractive or beautiful, having a short stature and weak, not healthy, frail. She was married in 1854 to a clergyman who was a curate under her father, and that was Arthur Nicholas. So it was in 1854 that she got married, and it was in 1855 that she died. So the marriage was perhaps an unfortunate one, because as she conceived, she developed some sort of illness and she died. Now, let me tell you something about the three sisters, that it was a Victorian age when Jane Austen was depicting a portrayal of the female protagonists who were charming, who were beautiful. These three sisters, they broke the lineage, and instead of depicting a charming heroine or a robust hero, you will find in their novels female characters of strength, of spirit, who are independent and who you can say that they can claim themselves as a feminist and individualist. So here, what is different about these sisters is that you will find something masculine in their writing style. Why I'm saying masculine? I'm not trying to degrade their works. Rather, I'm trying to say that since in Victorian age, as Showalter has said in one of her essays, that women were in the double bind and they were compelled to write on certain themes like kitchen, fashion, clothing, and so on. So here you will find that the heroines of these three sisters, they were not limited to such themes. Rather, they were one who explored the world, you can say. And they had a world of their own. And here you will find Jane Eyre as one who is not just stuck to kitchen or clothing. Rather, she is one who you will find that there is a visual power that she had. It was with Charlotte Bronte too, and you will find that Jane Eyre too had that visual power. And she, in the beginning, initially you will find that she is getting gaze, male gaze, but she inverted this, and by the end of the novel, you will find that she is one who is giving eyes to Mr. Rochester, the hero, who is an angry hero in the very beginning, initially when he was introduced. So now let us come to the novel. Okay, let me tell you that Charlotte wrote 4 novels. First is Jane Eyre. It was published in 1847. Then Shirley, again in 1847. Willett in 1853. And The Professor in 1857, which published posthumously. As far as the skill of Charlotte Bronte is concerned, we find that in all her novels, she was technically very strong because of the gripping stories. The gripping storyline was there, and the character portrayal were quite strong. And apart from this, you will find too much of emotional impact is visible. For instance, there is pity, there is sympathy, there is emotions, and suspense is something that you will find in all her novels. Now, when we come to the novel, particularly Jane Eyre, we find that Jane Eyre is actually a journey from her childhood to maturity, when she is of the age of 10 years till she is nearing 20. So these are the 10 eventful years that has been recorded by Jane Eyre herself, and this novel is an autobiography of Jane Eyre. Why I'm saying autobiography? Because we see that she narrates the story with I, and in the end, when we see that she is with Mr. Rochester in Ferndean, she says that she is writing something, she is writing a novel by the name of Jane Eyre. So we come to know that from the very beginning, that is, she is 10 years old, she is recording this story, this autobiography of her own when she is in Ferndean in the end of the novel. Okay. Now, we can divide this novel into 5 parts. There are 5 phases. The first phase is the Gateshead Hall. At Gateshead Hall, she is a young girl, and then and she is living with her maternal uncle and aunt, where uncle is no more, and she is dependent upon the family of Mrs. Sarah Reed, and there were 3 kids also, Georgiana, Eliza, and John Reed. Now the second phase of the novel goes to the Lowood School, where she got her primary or earlier education, and she spent 8 years there, 6 as student and 2 years as teacher. Now the third phase is one where she goes to start teaching Adele in Thornfield Hall. So this is the third phase where she met Mr. Rochester, and this is the part which is most interesting. You will find that she comes out to be a heroine at this particular in this particular phase of novel. Now next she goes to the Moore House, that is to St. Rivers. St. Rivers was living with 2 of her sisters, that is Diana and Maria. And the fifth one is at Ferndean village, where she again comes back to Mr. Rochester. So a kind of circle is there where you will find that she rejects Rochester in the beginning, and then she meets Rochester by the end of the novel. So we have 5 phases, and you will find that at every phase she seems to grow. And since she is growing at every phase, therefore this novel is a Bildungsroman. And I would further deal the story, the summary line, and would show that how she develops from a child to a mature girl, a girl who is now, you can say, reversing the male gaze. Okay, I'm coming to it now. So here, in the very beginning, we see that Jane Eyre, when she returns from a walk, and if you will find any question, you will please you can ask, so that I could be more interactive. In the very first phase, that is at Gateshead Hall, we see that Jane is returning from a walk, and she picks a book, that is Bewick's History of British Birds. With this book, the History of British Birds, she sits on the window sill. Window sill is very much like where she sits. She raises the curtain so that nobody from the house, nobody inside the house can see her. Now she is on the windowsill, sitting over there with a book in her lap. The book is a visual book, and the name of the book is History of British Birds. Okay, and the glass is there on the outer side of the window. Now she is invisible to the family members, those who are inside the house, and she is able to explore the outside world because she can see outside the window. And now here, as she opens the book, she sees so many visuals, and then she starts imagining of various places in the world. And this way we see that it is for the first time that we are introduced with a heroine, a girl of 10 years, and she perhaps is visualizing a world of her own where she is looking outside. She is relating it with the visuals that she is watching on the books, on the pages, and she is trying to weave a world of her own. She is trying to establish a pattern for her own world. Are you getting it? So now you will see that it is at this point of time, when she is merely a girl of 10 years, she is trying to weave a world of her own. She is trying to establish a pattern for her own self. It means that some sense of feminism was there, some sense of identity, asserting her identity was there from the very beginning. And here she was prompted by John Reed. John Reed is a 14 years old boy, a very naughty one, a very, very mischievous boy. He comes there and he snatches the book from her hand and flings it on her head. Her head got hurt and blood comes out of it. So this way there was a kind of, harsh communication they exchanged among them, and suddenly she was joined by, this conflict was joined by Mrs. Reed, and she comes to lock her up in the red room. So this is for the first time when she started to assert her own world. When she started to establish the pattern for her own life, she was authoritatively encroached by a male gaze, and that is a boy, John. And here, for the first time, she had to, as we see, as we perceive in the novel, she had to rebel, she had to revolt, and she got no response from anybody in the family, and she was locked up in the red room. And the red room was one where she cannot explore anything, that she cannot see outside. So she was locked in a room where she was perhaps about to restrict her thought, her exploration, her the world that she was trying to discover. Now this red room was one where Mr. Reed, the uncle of Jane, was died a premature death, and this was there in her mind, and therefore she became kind of a shock. She felt she was terrible. She was terrified with this feeling, with this idea that her uncle died here, and she felt some flash of light gleaming and then growing towards the ceiling, and then she felt unconscious. So perhaps this light indicates that she was there as a phantom. She can glimpse perhaps her own self, but because of terror, she got unconscious, and she was caught by fever. Further, you will find that in the novel, she was sent to Lowood School. It was decided by the family that she would be sent to Lowood School, and this Lowood School was headed by Mr. Brocklehurst. Mr. Brocklehurst is again another man, another male person whose gaze perhaps would try to analyze, would try to restrict this girl. Earlier she was being restricted by John, who was at Gateshead Hall, and here at Lowood School, when she was sent to Lowood School, another male gaze that disturbed her, that tried to restrict her, was Mr. Brocklehurst. Now here she faced Mr. Brocklehurst, and she got punishment by him. She was insulted before all the school, the teachers and the students, but it was Jane who forgets the agony and she tries to cope with it in order to further proceed. And in the coming years, she did her best. How? By her industriousness, by the support of one of her friend, that is Helen Burns, by the support of one of the superintendent, a teacher, that is Miss Templeton. And therefore, perhaps the second journey, the second phase, you can say, of the novel is quite comfortable as compared to the previous one, because at least somebody was there to support her, like Helen Burns and Miss Templeton, as well as other teachers too, when they saw that she is quite industrious, hardworking, she is doing things with all the responsibilities. Therefore, she was appreciated, and this gave her a chance to improve. And something poetic was there in her, something as she was trying to explore the world at Gateshead Hall. You will find that here, this is the second phase of the novel. Here too she is trying to explore when she was one day roaming around the school, and what she says, what she notices is that she enjoyed the natural scenery around the school, and she writes, and now vegetation matured with vigor. Lowood shook loose its tresses. It became all green, all flowery. Its great elm, ash, and oak skeletons were restored to a majestic life. Woodland plants sprang up profusely in its recesses. This beautiful description is symbolic of the advent of spring in nature as well as the advent of spring in her own life, because it is for the first time that she got appreciated from the people outside. She was always appreciating herself, she was always asserting herself, but apart from her, there were people who appreciated, who kind of supported her. So she sums up her school life as, why I'm saying so, because it has some connection with further novel, and therefore I'm trying to tell you what exactly she told. And this description of nature is also important from the point of view of that in the very beginning, when she was sitting at the window sill, she was exploring, she was trying to explore the world, she was imagining, but she was prompted by John Reed. But here it is for the second time, in the second phase of the novel, again she is with nature, she is with the outside world, and she is depicting it without any interference. So it is in the second phase we find that she depicts the novel, the nature, the scenery, the outside world that she has to explore without any interference. And now she, in the Lowood school, she was as a student for 6 years, and for 2 years she was as a teacher, and now she wanted to change. For a change, she wanted to explore some other place, and therefore when she saw an advertisement of a tutor as a governess, she applied for that, and the next phase would go to the Thornfield Hall, where she is the tutor of Adele, a little girl. But before that, she is summing up her life at this school as, during these 8 years, my life was uniform, but not unhappy, because it was not inactive. I had the means of an excellent education placed within my reach, a fondness for some of my studies, and a desire to excel in all, together with a great delight in pleasing my teachers. In time, I rose to be the first girl of the first class. Then I was invested with the office of teacher, which I discharged with zeal for 2 years. So this way she is summing up her school days. Now she goes to Thornfield Hall. So the third phase is at Thornfield Hall. Now here at Thornfield Hall, you will find, as I told you, that the entire, this is the part, this is the phase where she comes out to be as a true heroine. she comes out to be a different person because she got lot to explore, and therefore you will find that this is the most prominent part of the novel. Here she is the she is the governess of Adele, who is an illegitimate daughter of a French opera dancer, and she is teaching her here. But apart from that, she is also living here in the Thornfield Hall, and therefore she is having a lot of experiences here, new experiences that would expose her to the world somewhat more, as she did in the first and the second phase. Here she comes to know that this is a mansion by some Mr. Rochester, owned by some Mr. Rochester, and he is a man who occasionally lives out of the mansion. She occasionally comes to the mansion, and therefore there is some mystery that, we can therefore call it a Gothic novel also, because not only the element that is related to Mr. Rochester, rather there is something more about his past life that we would come to know in the novel further. So there is some Gothic element, and that is very much associated with the life, with the life of Mr. Rochester, the hero of the novel. Now here also, when Rochester arrives Thornfield Hall, before that she was sometimes in the habit of going to the roof, and she describes one day when she climbs to the roof house, she says, "A far over sequestered field and hill and a long dim skyline." And she further says, "I longed for a power of vision which might overpass that limit." Now here power of vision is something that is to be noticed, because he is asking for a power of vision that was there in her in the very first phase, in the second phase, and here in the third phase too, this power of vision is. So here I was talking about power of vision. So power of vision is something that you will find it runs throughout the novel. Why it is running throughout? Because it was, as I told you in the very beginning, when she was sitting at the window, when she was describing the nature outside the Lowood School, and here when she is at the rooftop, she says that I longed for a power of vision which might overpass that limit. And here she is talking of power of vision, and this power of vision is quite relevant because, I once read about Charlotte Bronte that she used to scribble with her eyes closed. She was imagining, she was having some vision, and she used to write with her eyes closed. So there was some power of vision that she had, and she inculcated this power of vision in her heroine Jane Eyre too. Because here when she is longing for power of vision, you will find that this vision is something that helps her in reverting back the male gaze, about which I would talk after this summary. Now, Rochester arrives at Thornfield Hall. If you know this story, you might be knowing that how he comes. He was helped by Jane Eyre, and he, the hero, was a plain-looking man, somewhat ugly, not very much attractive, and so the girl was. She too was a simple, plain-looking girl. So there was nothing romantic in their physical appearance, but Charlotte has the capacity to, without any a romantic scene, without any intimate scene, she had depicted the passion that was there. The passion throughout it was there, from the very first sight, the very first vision, till she was there with a man who lost his eyesight and who was crippled in Ferndean. Okay, so you will find that this passion has been time and again intense, with so much of intensity it has been depicted by Charlotte Bronte, but she has never used any romantic scene in her novel. Now, as we come to see that Rochester was a very rich man, he was perhaps, as Jane heard from so many of the servants in the house, she comes to know that there is some Blanche Ingram, and he is about to marry Blanche Ingram. She is a very beautiful, a rich lady. And there was a party thrown by Mr. Rochester in the main course, And in the party, again you will find that everything was going on, hustle and bustle was there, and too much of preparation was going on. Then for dining, for dinner party, Adele and Jane was called by Mr. Rochester. Now here again, Jane Eyre did something. She took the window place. She hid somewhat with the curtain of hide herself with the curtain of the window, and she was exploring. She was observing the whole party, the whole appearances, the faces very keenly and closely. So this window seat is something that is very important for her, because that helped her in order to hide herself from the whole of the world, and from there she used only her own gaze instead of being looked at by someone, by some male person, and she from there, hiding herself behind the curtain, she was gazing at Mr. Rochester, and she find him quite attractive, and she describes something about his eyes, that his eyes have a kind of charm, a kind of some attraction is there. So you will find that there is too much about eyes of each other. Mr. Rochester has told too much about the eyes, about the vision, about the visual power, about the beauty of her eyes, about the the protrusion is there. So you will find that both Jane as well as Rochester, they talk too much about each other's eyes, and eyes have significance because you will find that in Ferndean village, in the end of the novel, Mr. Rochester loses his eyesight, and he was being guided by the visual power of Jane Eyre. Now then we come to know that gradually they fall in love with each other. However, Jane was not expressing her love for Mr. Rochester because she was in the perception that he would marry Blanche and Graham. But one day he proposed Jane Eyre, and she replied in affirmative, and then they decided to marry. However, when Rochester was giving so much of gift to Jane, she denied, and she accepted only the wedding gown. Now there is one more scene that comes after this, which is very much the repetition of the scene that was there in the Red Room in the very first phase. So here, when she was sleeping with a wedding gown kept there on her bed, suddenly a light came, a flash of light came, and because of that flash of light she got awakened, and she saw that somebody is there, some flickering trace was there, and that trace laughed, and it torn her veil that she had to wear the next day. Now here we find that there was a light in Red Room, and there is a flash of light here, and this flash of light is something that changes her life for future. Here also you will find that she was happily going to marry with a person whom she loved, but now her life is going to change. Some chaos is going to happen. And what happened that next day when they were about to marry, Mr. Briggs, a solicitor from London, came there, interrupted, and he revealed that Mr. Rochester is already married. He had a wife, and therefore it is illegal on his part to marry again. And there is one more man, Mr. Mason. He was also one relative of his previous wife. Now further we come to know that it was actually shocking and for Jane Eyre, but further everything was revealed. They went with Mr. Rochester and Jane to see that wife, and we come to know that there was a mad woman in the attic. Mad woman in the attic is Bertha Mason. Why I'm saying Mad Women in the Attic? Because this is a very popular essay by Sandra Gilbert and Susan Goober, and this essay has been written keeping in mind Bertha Mason. And this way, in this essay, they try to capture the idea that how women are compelled to behave in a certain manner. Now here, when we come to proceed further, we find that now the marriage is all disturbed and they had to part now. However, Mr. Rochester convinces Jane Eyre that Bertha is actually a mad wife. She was behaving violently times and again. So how can he be able to express everything to Jane? He loves Jane too much, and therefore he was fearful in revealing the truth to Jane. But he also says that however, he expresses that though I love you, though this marriage would be an illegal one, but I love you and I would love you throughout. So can't we go away from Thornfield Hall in order to live with each other? But she was Jane. She was a feminist, an independent woman. She never wanted to live a life of a mistress, and therefore, in this clash, in this conflict of love, passion on one side and independence on the other, she chose to go with independence. She chose to maintain the esteem of her, identity. She asserted her identity, and she rejected the love, the passion that was there in her for Mr. Rochester, and she left that place without food, without water. She started traveling along. She herself was not aware that where she is about to. And further, she has so much of self-esteem that she never asked for food from anyone. Rather, she wanted to sell her handkerchief. In spite of asking for food, she was asking a shopkeeper that if there is any job, she would love to do that. But ultimately, she got nothing, and therefore, she was in a very miserable condition in the end when she was helped by Mr. Rivers and his family. There were two sisters, and this is the next phase, that is the fourth phase. Mr. Rivers and his family, that is, there were two sisters, Diana and Maria. Here you will find that Mr. Rivers was a clergyman. He helped Jane. He served Jane, and not only he not only did this, rather he also, after some time when she recovered, she also allowed her to do a job of a tutor or a teacher in one of the school in village. And since she had some expertise in teaching, therefore it was an easy task for her. But suddenly, in due course of time, she comes to know that she is somehow related to, or you can say that she was a cousin sister of Mr. Rivers. And therefore, when she got some legacy from a distant uncle, she distributed this amount, that is the 20,000 pounds, into 4 equally, because she wanted to be with the family. She would have taken the whole amount, but what she says is that it would be she would feel happy to be with family, and money is something that is not that relevant for her. So this way, many a times we find that she comes out as a woman of strength, as a woman of spirit, as a true heroine. And further, Rivers, now I'm coming to the fifth part, further River offered her to marry, but she rejected that because she was actually in love with Mr. Rochester. And she rejected this idea, this offer, because of Mr. Rochester's, love was there embedded within her. And further, River says that she is not marrying her because of any, attraction towards her. Rather, he wanted her to go to India to preach people. And therefore, she was she was trying to go with yes, but suddenly she heard that Mr. Rochester is calling her name thrice, Jane, Jane, Jane. And it was, yes, actually Mr. Rochester was uttering her name. And this was, you can say that it was the true passion, the true love. That is why she heard Mr. Rochester's, urge. And then she rushes back to Mr. Rochester, and when she reaches Thornfield Hall, she comes to know that the Thornfield Hall, the mansion, is all ruined because Bertha, his mad wife, she, because of her, the mansion caught fire, and she jumped into the fire. And in order to save her, she died, but in order to save her, Mr. Rochester lost his sight as well as one of his arm. And now he is in Ferndean village, and some few old servants are serving him there. He is all alone with no relative of his. Means with nobody there to take care with more consciousness. Now she rushes to Ferndean village, and there is, reunion of the true love. And here you will find that she served Mr. Rochester, she helped her in so many things, and ultimately she married Mr. Rochester, who lost his sight and who was crippled, who lost one of his arm. Now here we find that there is something more. Let me tell you that there was one son also. She delivered a son who was having resemblance with Mr. Rochester. And she says that she considers herself as a happy woman because she wins her love in the end. Now this is the story, the summary part. Now let me tell you the analysis of this story, and I would deal with that this is an autobiographical novel, this is a feminist novel, this is a Bildungsroman, and how being a feminist novel, it reverted the male gaze about which I was talking again and again. So since it is an autobiographical novel, let me tell you that there are certain incidents that happen in the life of Charlotte Bronte, and she repeats it in the autobiography of Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is writing this autobiography when she is in Ferndean village with Mr. Rochester. Well, Jane Eyre is writing her own life story, her own autobiography. But, it is not just the autobiography of Jane Eyre, rather it is also an autobiography of Charlotte Bronte. Because we see that Charlotte Bronte had two sisters, as I told you initially, who died in the girlhood in the school. And the condition of school, why they died? Because the condition of school was not good. Maria and Elizabeth, they died because of tuberculosis as well as the insane condition that was there in the school. And they are depicting Helen Burns. Helen Burns in the novel is a close friend of Jane Eyre, and you will find that she was sharing every big and small thing with Helen Burns. Helen Burns was giving all strength to her, always trying to convince to cope up with the agony that she was facing, but she died of tuberculosis. So here you will find that there is a resemblance between the two sisters, that is the two sisters Elizabeth and Maria, with Helen Burns. Now you will find that Mr. Brocklehurst, and she too got education in a school that was known as Cowan Bridge School. It was a school which was meant for the kids of the clergies, and it was a kind of school without much fee. The condition was very much poor as it was there in the Lowood School. So the depiction of Lowood School in the novel is very much like Cowan Bridge, in which Charlotte Bronte was studying. So here you will find that she, through Jane's autobiography, she is also presenting her own autobiography. Then there is character of Mr. Brocklehurst, who was the head of the school, a man who was always, kind of hypocritical man. And here you will find that Caris Wilson was the head of the school at the time when Charlotte Bronte was studying in Cowan Bridge. He too was a similar man, a hypocritical man, an angry young man who always used to poke his nose in every affair of the school, and he was not treating the students well. He was not giving food, and therefore after some time he was also there was some charge that was placed against him by the authorities. Now we also find that in the end of the novel, we know that Rochester was blind, and here when Charlotte Bronte was actually writing Jane Eyre, at that time her father was having some operation of eye operation, and he too was in the similar situation. He too lost his sight up to a lot extent. So here again you will find some similarity, that when she is about to end this novel, she was serving a father who was who lost his eyesight up to a lot extent. And therefore similarly you will find that when Jane is writing her autobiography, he is having Mr. Rochester, who lost his eyesight to a lot extent, and after that he also it reverted back to some extent. Now we find that there is some Gothic element, because Mr. Rochester, we do not know much about his past. Why he goes always to the field, why he occasionally comes to the Thornfield Hall, and who is Bertha Mason, how he married a woman who was mad, and we have answer to this in Jean Rhys White's Saga Susie. It is a prequel to Jane Eyre, and you will find that in Jean Rhys White's Saga Susie, she has written the prequel, the pre-story, the story before marriage. And at that time, Bertha was Antoinette, with a different name in Jamaica. She was a beautiful girl. Rochester went Jamaica sometimes, and he married Antoinette. He brought her to England, and there he locked her in the room in attic. Now 5 to 6 more minutes. Now you will find that when he brought back, she was to a different culture, with a different name, with a different man, and she was locked in the room, in the attic, and therefore naturally she is going to behave in such a manner. So you can see that there is a post-colonial reading that goes on when we go through White's Saga Susie, written by Jean Rhys. And this post-colonial reading says that why an individualist, why a feminist, why Jane Eyre, who has been depicted as an individualist, is depicted such at the cost of an Eastern woman, that is Bertha Mason. So there is a post-colonial reading of it. And then there is, you will see that the way she laughs, it was a laughing that was very much similar to Jane Eyre's acting. Jane Eyre was acting in a manner as to empower or to assert her identity. But since Bertha was a third world woman, she had nothing to do. She was unable to write, therefore she spoke through her body. And there is one essay by Helen Chico, Laugh of Medusa. So through that essay you will find that her laughter is very much similar. Bertha's laughter is very much similar to the laugh of Medusa, where Medusa laughs in order to speak through her body. And you know that Jane seems to be an ideal, and Bertha is the dark double of Jane. where she too is trying to assert her identity, but since she is not allowed to do so, as Jane was not allowed to do so in the very first phase, that is at Gateshead Hall. She was not allowed to express there, and similarly Bertha is the dark double, as she is not allowed to do so, and therefore she spoke through her body. And many a time she set fire to Thornfield Hall when Jane saved Rochester. This scene is also there, I missed that. So why she was doing so? Again, in order to speak through her body. And ultimately she commits suicide, you can say. She was responsible for burning Thornfield Hall, and she jumped to commit suicide. Again, she was trying to speak through her body. It was a kind of revolt, since she too was a woman of strength, a woman of spirit like Jane. Therefore, instead of surrendering, she was trying to do something violently. Now, there is one more thing that I would like to say, since I have a very, 5 minutes only. I would like to sum it up, because this is very important part, the male gaze, about which I was mentioning or addressing again and again. Here, the visual power of Jane is symbolic of the social or the sexual power. This is something very important. You should note this, because the visual power has been highlighted. Many a times you will see that they are talking about the gaze, they are talking about the eyes, they are talking about the way, the expression with which they see each other. So here visual power is symbolic of sexual and social power, and through this visualization Jane asserted her identity. Jane seems to be assertive. How? Because in the very beginning, when she was at the window seat, again and again I'm going to that seat, because from there she tries to explore the world, and this way it was her first attempt to explore the world of her own, and she was trying to have established some social power in the social power. Now next we find that though the Bronte's world too was masculine in nature, and therefore she struggled to reverse, to redefine the structure of the society through all the 5 phases. In the very first phase, when she was at the window seat, at that time also she wanted to assert her identity, and then when she was at Lowood School, she was not expressing her submissiveness in front of Mr. Brocklehurst. So this way also she was trying to deal with the gaze of a male, that is Mr. Brocklehurst. In the third phase, when she was in Thornfield Hall, again, as I told you, that she was sitting by the window in the dining hall, and she was looking at the various faces in the party. At that time also she was trying to understand the gaze of Rochester. And let me quote you something from a paper from Johns Hopkins University. Here she says that she observed Rochester and says that great dark eyes and very fine eyes too, and he suddenly turns and caught my gaze. And then further she goes to say that, okay, so this way you can say that here with Mr. Rochester, she is dealing more easily as compared to the previous 2 phases, when she was facing John, when she was facing Mr. Brocklehurst. Here they are equivalent. She is trying to break the patriarchal structure that she started sitting on the window. And window seat is also very important because of one more reason, that she was on the borderline, inside and outside. And this borderline is not just inside and outside, it was not just a line, but she was trying to create a space, an interior space of her own. Therefore, she is in between the female and the male world. She is in between the male and the female world is also very much, relevant from the point of view of the pseudonym that she used, which was in neuter gender. So this way we come to see in the next part in the next phase when she faces Mr. Rivers, Saint Rivers, then he is a timid man, and here he has been described by her as sitting as still as one of the dusky pictures on the walls, keeping his eyes fixed on the page, was easy enough to examine. Now she is examining him, because now she is dominating from the gateshed to Lowood School, and then she is equal almost to Mr. Rochester when she is at Thornfield Hall, and when she is at Moore House with St. Rivers, she is trying to examine his gaze. She is trying to dominate that man, and in the end, when she is coming to Ferndean, she is very much the eyes of Mr. Rochester. She is giving eyes, she is giving gaze to Mr. Rochester. It was not he who is gazing, rather she is giving gaze to him. And she says, I was then his vision, she says. He saw nature, he saw books through me, and never did I grow weary of gazing on his behalf. Now what she is doing? She is showing Mr. Rochester the path. So it is quite, a bold attempt on the part of Charlotte Bronte that when women were trying to assert their identity in the Victorian age, she portrayed a heroine who dominates gradually. She, like a Bildungsroman, she develops gradually in order to dominate a man. And here she says in the very end of the novel, I am still his right hand. Now she's his right hand. By the time she writes her autobiography, Rochester may be able to, this is an extract from John Hopkins University का एक paper है. By the time she writes her autobiography, Rochester may be able to read it with her assistance, but he will never be able to write his own. He is now reader, and she is the writer. He is the reader of what she has written. She is more affirmative, she is assertive, she is writing, she is creating a world not for her own self, which she was exploring throughout her life. Rather, she is writing a world for Mr. Rochester too. She asserts her textual power by writing not the story of Mrs. Rochester, but she wrote a book defiantly entitled Jane Eyre. So, thank you if there is any question.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable insight and expertise with us. Now it's time for vote of thanks. I request Dr. Mahima ma'am for vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sanskriti, and we will take questions there in the department as we have another program scheduled in the conference hall. So otherwise there was no issue of time, Dr. Supriya. Okay, now thank you, Dr. Supriya, for delivering such a beautiful lecture on the topic Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and especially the three parts of the lecture that you delivered. The first part you highlighted the subtle aspect of the life of the Charlotte Bronte and how it matches with the novel, all the incidents of the novel. So you really provided a perspective to the students, and that could be called a psychoanalytical perspective, because when we are dealing with the feminist text, and I don't know how far it is right to call Jane Eyre as a feminist text, because at that time women, they started within the lines and also between the lines. So I'm using this typical term from Ellen Showalter. So yeah, you provided a perspective and approach to the students, and that is psychoanalytical in nature, because until and unless you go back to the lifestyle of a writer, the psychic, the creativity of the writer, you cannot probably do justice in the course of your reading. And as far as this novel by Charlotte Bronte is concerned, the surrealistic representation, the vision, a dream through which she does the characterization, the exploration of the inner self, and especially Bronte's innovative aspect in the Victorian society that she does by exploring mind and body in the role of Jane Eyre and Bertha Mason. I would like to mention one more thing what Madam Supriya highlighted in her lecture throughout, that actually Charlotte Bronte continued that popular image of 19th century where angel in the house and monster. And these two images of women were continued by Charlotte Bronte, not invented by Charlotte Bronte. So mind it that I want to highlight, and I just want to provide a kind of voice to the madam lecture, what she said in her entire lecture, that angel in the house and monster in the house, both the images are popularized by men, and it is followed by Bronte in her novel, but with a different kind of perspective. There is a constant clash. As you know that angel in the house is nothing else but a simple, sweet, smiling, placid, motherly kind of woman is going to be called as angel, because who has no bias, who is selfless creature, who is not going to raise question for the property right or any sort of decision not lies in the hand of a woman. She is the angel, and the moment a woman holds a desire, she talks about her physical desire, her mental desire, she becomes monster. So this particular division between mind and body, between angel and monster, is actually a clash between powerlessness and desire for power. So Charlotte Bronte succeeds in achieving that power for desire via Bertha Mason. However, certain descriptions like the way she is crawling and the gibberish tongue in which she speaks, it tries to provide us the typical conventional notion of madness, but Bronte is successful in providing us that reviewing of dominant ideology through the character Bertha Mason. So I think Madam has given her valuable time. We are thankful. So once again, on behalf of department and on my personal behalf, I express my thankfulness to you, Dr. Supriya. Further, I am thankful to Dr. Indrajit Mishra, to whom I requested to organize this lecture on the topic, because this novel is classic feminine text. As she mentioned about Jean Rye's White Sargasso Sea, you cannot read until and unless you have knowledge of this particular novel, Jane Eyre. So thank you, sir. Dr. Jan is not present here. I'm grateful to her as well, and to the entire department, Dr. Vandana ma'am, Najmul Hassan, Saket, and Miss Sanskriti. My thanks are due to the Pratap, who looks after our news coverage, media manager, and my thanks are also due to the coordinator of Media Center, Mr. Ajay Pratap Singh, who is also not present here, but the work is going on, and he is doing a great job by archiving our each academic event on digital platform. Thank you, dear students, because without you this program or any lecture cannot be successful. I'm thankful to Dr. Sanjay Singh sir, who had joined this lecture in this busy schedule after taking classes. Thank you all.